Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this IT governance webinar on leveraging ISO 27001 for strategic regulatory compliance and a competitive edge. I'm Alan Calder. I'm the Chief Executive of IT Governance, which I founded some 15 or more years ago to be a single source of guidance and expertise for everything to do with governance of IT, cyber risk management, and IT compliance. I wrote a book called the International Guide to Data Security and ISO 27001, the 8th edition of which has just been published excitingly, and a bunch of other books around cybersecurity, ISO 27001, privacy, and so on. And I speak to a lot of clients and organizations, and we as an organization, IT Governance has some 20 years of experience. We have about 180 people. We have deep subject matter expertise through our consultants, our trainers, our subject matter expertise, about 12,000 customers across all 5 continents, and a comprehensive ISO 27001 products and service offering. So we think that our deep expertise, the wide recognition there is of that, is at the heart of the promise we make to our customers that we deploy our expertise for your peace of mind. And across the broad range of customers, we have 15,000 training course delegates from well more than 1,300 organizations we've helped prepare for and maintain ISO 27001. A lot of customers using our governance, risk management, and compliance software, a huge range of third-party accreditations and certifications, and of course, customer feedback, all of which says that we are focused on customer service, on quality service, on looking after what our customer needs are, on making sure that we do deploy our expertise and our efforts to enable our clients to manage their regulatory, cybersecurity, and privacy exposures in a way that's cost-effective, pragmatic, practical, enables them to focus on their day-to-day business. And that's really what we're going to be doing more of today. We'll be looking briefly at the evolving regulatory compliance landscape. We'll be looking at how ISO 27001 can be a game changer for compliance, not just for cybersecurity, the importance of real-time visibility and the confidentiality, integrity, and availability, principles in compliance and security, turning compliance into a competitive advantage, and then leveraging CyberComply for a competitive edge in strategic regulatory compliance. You'll all have noticed that you are on mute, but that's only to cut out background noise. If you find that you have questions that you want to ask as we go through the webinar, please go to the question box in the top ribbon of your GoToWebinar screen. So if you look up there, there's a ribbon. Towards the right-hand side, there will be a small box with a question mark in it. If you click on that, it will open up the question and answer functionality. And you can type a question in there at any time. When we come to the Q&A section of today, which will be up after about 40 or 45 minutes, then I will go through whatever questions there are. I'll share the question with everybody in the audience and then, to the best of my ability, answer it. And in all, we have about an hour available, so I'm aiming to finish this webinar by 4 o'clock British Summer Time. And of course, I hope that wherever you are actually having a bit of summer. So, the evolving regulatory compliance landscape. What are we looking at right now? We're looking certainly at increased regulation plus increased scrutiny and enforcement. In the US, the SEC has a set of requirements around reporting data breaches. It's taking action to deal with that, and while it's not sure how the Chevron decision will affect the ability of the SEC to enforce cybersecurity activity, the reality is that cybersecurity risks are growing all the time, and the SEC and other entities in the US have to take action to contain them. In the UK and across Europe, central banks, so the European Central Bank in the EU has issued enforcement measures, including potential fines for banks failing to manage not just cybersecurity, but climate and environmental risks effectively. You've got to manage climate and environmental risk alongside cybersecurity, privacy, and all the rest of the standard set of operational risks. DORA, the relatively new regulatory framework for EU financial sector organizations, which comes into effect in January 2025. We're now coming to that ramping up period where suddenly people realize what they've got to do, but effectively, DORA requires financial institutions to make sure that they've got a genuinely resilient set of frameworks that can deal with cyber threats and technical disruptions. And there are some significant requirements around ICT risk management. There's material incident reporting is a major set of requirements on financial institutions dealing with cybercrime syndicates who are increasingly creative. The deployment of AI has speeded up the effectiveness and the way in which cybercrime groups can deploy attack software, the effectiveness. And of course, not only does that mean that organizations are falling prey, but the regulatory impacts are much greater as well, because you should have seen it coming. GDPR enforcement continues to attract serious regulatory action. Operational resilience, financial institutions required to deal with critical business continuity, the Network and Information Security Directive, much more broad than simple financial institutions, covering all critical national infrastructure, and of course, cloud compliance, cloud adoption, the ongoing move to cloud, the deployment of Internet of Things, the proliferation, particularly out of the European Union, of legislation that deals with issues like security in Internet of Things, security in hardware, security in cloud services, security in AI. And AI is going to be, we think, over the course of the next couple of years, a major area for challenging organizations for how they manage AI effectively inside their own environment. So it's a rapidly changing regulatory compliance environment. In the UK, at least, the possibility of a set of changes to the Data Protection Act are off the table for the foreseeable future. We can just concentrate on compliance with UK GDPR. So how does ISO 27001 play into into compliance requirements? Well, most compliance is focused on confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And those three objectives are at the heart of ISO 27001. ISO 27001 says it is about helping organizations focus on CI&A in order to meet regulatory demands while strengthening their market position. That's really what clause 4 of ISO 27001 is talking about. And so if you think of ISO 27001, therefore, not simply as a standard which is about ensuring information security, but as a standard which is about ensuring regulatory compliance as well as information security, then you are already halfway towards leveraging ISO 27001 to demonstrate compliance with the broad range of regulations that are going to be relevant for your organization. GRC platforms, so platforms which are designed to enable you to cost effectively manage the growing range of regulatory documentation, of process activity, of risk identification. GRC platforms, AI-based tools help monitor changes, automate compliance processes. Those make businesses more agile, more cost effective, more responsive to changes. You've got to have the right GRC platform, obviously. And of course, to build operational resilience. And the newspapers show you day after day after day organizations who fail to take appropriate steps to plan for operational resilience. And operational resilience is what it's about today. It's no longer just about protecting the organization. It's recognizing that you're going to be breached and that you need to be able to manage the breach in a way that is going to enable you to overcome it and recover and get back up and operational very quickly. And operational resilience, managing incidents in a structured way, managing privacy as part of how you manage cybersecurity and vice versa. Those are key areas in which platforms like CyberComply enable you to join together all of the various areas that you're dealing with so that you avoid the even bigger risk of tackling each of those regulations in their own silo. When you tackle regulations in a silo, you not only lose the benefit cost savings through eliminating overlaps and bringing together single solutions to multiple problems, but you also spend much more money than you need to do. So finding ways in which you can proactively and coherently manage broad ranges of risk, broad sets of regulatory requirements through a single management system is a really cost-effective way of managing and mitigating major risk. So let's just look at ISO 27001 itself. How does ISO 27001 help deal with regulatory risk? It's, first of all, it's globally recognized as the comprehensive approach to information security management. It's not one of a number of different options from the ISO family or a number of different international standards around information security. It is the only information security standard available around the world. And so it's built around helping organizations systematically manage relevant, sensitive, valuable information effectively inside the organization. At the heart of ISO 27001 is the idea that the organization should carry out a thorough risk assessment process to identify what your attack surface is, what the threat horizon looks like, which assets are at risk, which particular attack vectors are going to affect which particular assets, what controls you can put in place to mitigate those attacks. And that's not just an ISO 27001 issue, it's the heart of just about every single approach to managing identifying risk, mitigating risk, and ISO 27001 mandates a very structured way of dealing with that. It also mandates top management commitments to information security and regulatory compliance. And top management commitment is not just about the board being committed, but it's about senior management being committed. It's about documentation being put in place, culture being built around regulatory compliance around information security, such that people think about and understand their risks as part of their day-to-day operational management. And therefore, sitting alongside or as part of that is the notion of continual improvement, of recognizing that it's virtually impossible to be perfect in terms of how you deal with information security and regulation, but that you can have continual improvement. You can find ways of operating processes more effectively, of buttoning down on specific risks more cost effectively. And that continual improvement process, making the ISMS more and more effective in terms of dealing with emerging threats, managing business changes, delivering cost effective compliance, or whatever it is you set as the objectives for your information security and compliance strategy. ISO 27001, the standard itself, pardon me, is built around doing exactly that. And so it's a strategic opportunity for organizations to tackle compliance with multiple frameworks. ISO 27001, you think it's about information security, but one of the requirements in GDPR, whether it's UK or EU GDPR, is that as an organization, you deploy state-of-the-art processes and mechanisms to protect personal data. And most personal data is held in digital format. Some obviously still analog, but most personal data is held in digital format. Most effective attacks are digital attacks. And so ISO 27001 controls also help you achieve GDPR compliance. So building GDPR compliance requirements into an ISO 27001 framework is a sensible way of demonstrating that you're doing what you need to do, and that when you have a breach and you're questioned as to whether you took appropriate steps to deal with privacy compliance, you can point at how you've done that in your ISO 27001 framework. Organizations operating in the US, obviously with United States public sector government organizations, NIST is a cybersecurity framework. It's not an internationally recognized framework in the same way that ISO 27001 is, but ISO 27001 aligns with NIST so that you can, using 27001, demonstrate with a bit of extra work how that also delivers compliance with the requirements of NIST, and therefore it depends on which particular NIST framework you're looking at. If it's a cybersecurity framework or one of the other standards, you can crosswalk all of the controls and requirements of ISO 27001 to controls and requirements in the various NIST standards so that you can demonstrate multiple standard compliance. Some organizations have to get SOC 2 compliance certificates. SOC 2 is fundamentally an audit process rather than an information security standard. It's an audit process built around 5 specific security principles, but an ISO 27001 management system, which has got in it the risk assessment, control selection, control process, is a management system which is, if you like, to compliance ready. It's not a very big step to go from ISO 27001 certification, which is a 3-year certification, to SOC 2 compliance certification, which is a 1-year certification, simply by monitoring the effectiveness of your controls over an extended period of time and using that evidence to demonstrate how you're meeting the SOC 2 compliance requirements. So 27001, therefore, a single approach enables you to cost effectively demonstrate compliance with multiple standards. And by extension, you can do the same with DORA. You can tie it into PCI compliance. There's a number of different ways in which you can use ISO 27001 to demonstrate compliance with, on one recent calculation, up to something like 35 different cybersecurity privacy frameworks that might be relevant or important, either on a regional basis or in a particular sector. So ISO 27001 can become a competitive advantage for an organization, not just because it brings operational efficiency and cost effectiveness, not just because it reduces the amount of time it takes to get compliance, it makes more simple and more cost effective the maintenance of compliance, but because the enhanced trust and credibility that you get from an ISO 27001 program, demonstrating a commitment to information security, helps you build trust with clients, partners, and stakeholders, helps you differentiate yourself in the market. There are still only some 75,000 organizations around the world which have ISO 27001 certificates. So it's still a significant differentiator, significant demonstration to existing and potential clients of the focus that you make to not only protecting data, but being around, being in existence in the longer term as a supplier for an organization. The impact, remember, of cyber attacks on organizations and supply chains disrupt supply chains. You, with an ISO 27001 certificate, demonstrate your commitments to being a robust, stable member of your client's supply chains into the future. And of course, all of the cost savings that come from reducing the likelihood of significant data breaches, reducing the likelihood of significant regulatory fines, all of those benefits are difficult to quantify because they're not things that you have to spend money on and now you don't. But if you just look at the costs that organizations that suffer cyber breaches suffer, you kind of have to ask yourself whether it's the kind of saving, avoiding spending money on cybersecurity, which any organization can afford to make. Almost always, the cost of a breach massively outweighs the cost of having avoided the breach in the first place. So ISO 27001, how do you get there? Once upon a time, it would have taken a long time, a lot of effort. Organizations like IT governance now help you do that on a very fast track basis. So rather than having to work out how to do it yourself, you can come to an organization like IT governance and say, right, get me there. I need ISO 27001 certification in 2 months or 3 months' time. I've got a number of clients who need to have it, or I want the assurance for the board, or I've got stakeholders who want us to have it. And ISO 27001 FastTrack is designed to streamline the process for our clients, because we've got internally all of the expertise that you could ever want to have access to, because we know, we've done it so often, we know exactly how to get an organization ISO 27001 ready. We can break the process down into manageable steps, we can manage it, we can implement it, we can save going up dead ends, we can just make it happen really fast. Organizations can achieve certification really quickly, and not just in a way that complies with international standards, but also in a way that enables you to thrive in a marketplace that values cyber security and cyber certainty. Typically, for an organization of 200 to 500 people, around about 2 to 3 months to get from standing start to ISO 27001 certification with our FastTrack solution. It's designed to expedite the certification process. We will work with certification partners to give you a single coherent price that covers both prep and external certification. But if you compare that process, the FastTrack with the CyberComply GRC platform, to doing it yourself, working out how to do it yourself, on the face of it, it looks much less costly, because you're only going to give one person the job and they're going to work out how to do it. Typically, doing it yourself will take about 18 months because whoever's doing it has a whole lot of other things to do. They've got to understand the standard. They've got to work out how to do it. They're going to go up blind alleys. There's a whole lot of documentation that you've got to produce. You could take somebody on to help you. That'll bring your period of implementation down maybe to 10 to 12 months, or you can get a platform which actually is kind of like pre-lived in. It's got all of the documentation, the processes that you need. You just have to get familiar with them. That can bring you down to 6 to 8 months. FasTrack, combination of expert consultants and CyberComply, and a methodology, frankly, which is designed and honed to deliver compliance fast, is what gets you to a place where you can go, actually, we've got the job done. And the price is also a massive saving. Taking on more people to help you do it, taking on more people and CyberComply costs you less because CyberComply reduces the amount of people you need. Using FasTrack methodology, typically for that 200 to 500 organizations, somewhere between 20 and 30,000 pounds to implement. There's an ongoing support cost in terms of CyberComply and staff awareness licensing, but you get a real fixed price, straightforward way of achieving ISO 27001. And that's made possible by the CyberComply platform, which is a cloud-based information security management platform. We know more about ISO 27001 than anyone else in the world. We know about how to actually implement it, as distinct from having read the standard and made some software. And so our CyberComply management system, out of the box, leaves our clients in a position where they're not going to make errors. They're simply going to get time saving, they can get efficiency, they're going to get results. It's going to happen very, very quickly. And our FasTrack methodology is built around what we call the 9 steps to implementation, 9 steps to success. It's a very straightforward implementation process. The book is now in the 2nd or 3rd edition, and we basically do most of it. So those are the 9 steps that you would read about in the 9 steps book. We essentially do 8 of those 9 steps. You give us input, but we essentially do 8 of those 9 steps. We do them on CyberComply, which has got all of the standardized processes, documentation in there. The customization of all of that we do on CyberComply. The implementation, of course, where there have to be changes in what you're currently doing to get your current processes in line with ISO 27001, you've got to do that. We can support it, but essentially got to do that. So that's how it happens fast. And because we know what we're doing, steps 1 through 6 and then 8 and 9, we can organize those, we can plan how we do it, we can execute them very quickly, and our consultants are very experienced, so they know how to do this very quickly. So 2 to 3 months, job done. In some cases, we can get you there even more quickly. So why would you choose ISO 27001 FasTrack? Why would you not do it yourself? Well, in a sense, that's kind of obvious, because you want to get it done fast. It's not your area of expertise. You've got a business to run. You've got clients to satisfy. ISO 27001 is becoming a basic cost to do business. So you need to execute on that as cost effectively as you can. ISO 27001 specialists get you through up to certification. The certification organization will come along because they know what we're doing is robust. They've done it many times before. For them, certification is a much more quick and efficient process than it would otherwise be. Enables you to leverage our expertise in a way that enables your internal resources to only provide basic input, rather than you having to develop in-house skills and competences to implement and manage ISO 27001. Risk management is robust. It's done in software which is built to manage risk. Help identify risks, got risk libraries, got vulnerability, threat libraries, all of those regularly updated, enables you to have a really robust risk management. Try and do risk assessments on spreadsheets. It's a guaranteed way for ineffectiveness, and of course the continuity when somebody leaves is really very difficult to demonstrate. And CyberComply, because of its management capability, effectively enables you then to manage the ISMS as well. It enables you through the task management capability to drive tasks out to the organization, enables you to do a whole number of the implementation stuff through a platform which effectively, therefore, not only helps you implement, but helps you manage your information security management system as well. And that ongoing compliance is really what ISO 27001 is about. ISO 27001 is fundamentally about a living information security management system which keeps you safe when you implement, once you've implemented it, but also on an ongoing basis thereafter. And that's why your certification is for a 3-year period. The certification body will come back on an annual basis and do continuing surveillance visits. Your internal audit process will continue looking for ways that you can drive improvement. In most of our clients, we provide the ongoing support, the management support for the client, which means that the ongoing internal audits, all of those components that drive a real long-term benefit for the clients, you can rely on. And because we know what we're doing, because we've done it so often, of course, all of that comes with a fixed price from us. We're able to tell you that it's not going to cost you more than whatever price we say it will be. And we can, at an implementation point, say we can guarantee that you will achieve certification. It's not an open, it's an open and shut. You will achieve certification. We know what we're doing. We guarantee that you will. Although we have no control over the certification process, we can guarantee that the work we do will meet any external third-party body certification requirements, and you will therefore get certification. And we write to customers often when we kick off a FastTrack program saying your supplier will be ISO 27001 compliant in this period of time. We can guarantee that. So, real-time visibility, centralization, the integrity and availability aspects of cyber security. The three, if you like, the building blocks of cybersecurity: confidentiality, integrity, availability, also the building blocks of pretty well every single regulation that has to deal with information, privacy, whatever it is. And the ISO 27001 control framework is also built around the attributes and controls that add up to an effective cyber defense in-depth framework. So cyber defense in-depth comes about because you identify threats, you protect the organization, you detect attacks when they come in, you respond to them appropriately, you recover from them when you're breached. And the range of controls that ISO 27001 provides, the mandated activities inside the clauses, all of those help you build cyber defense in depth. So an operationally resilient organization is an organization which has a really effective functioning ISO 27001 management system, remembering that information security and privacy are simply different sides of the same coin. I'm just going to take a couple of minutes to briefly look at ISO 27001 itself as a management system, just so you can link what I've been saying around the FasTrack approach to the slightly more detailed view of the makeup of the standard. So ISO 27001 is a 10-clause standard. You can effectively ignore clauses 1, 2, and 3 because those are basically scene setting. But what you have to do in order to demonstrate compliance is clauses 4 through 10. And the heart of those, if you think of it graphically, is leadership. It's senior management, board, senior management, top management, middle management, everybody through the organization taking ownership of the idea of information security, regulatory compliance, and making it part of the culture. Tackling compliance on the basis of where the risks are, rather than mindlessly trying to eliminate every single risk. You can't do that. There's only any point in eliminating the risks where the impact on the organization is not worth putting up with it. So there's a risk assessment process, and that risk assessment process then gets deployed into operations, is supported by appropriately competent people. You have a planning process that rolls out how you're going to deploy controls, update and manage controls, and then the improvement performance evaluation aspect, clauses 9 and 10, are the ongoing components of what you're doing on an everyday basis thereafter. All of that within the context of what sector are you in, what are the key requirements your customers have of you, what are the key jurisdictional requirements where you're operating, how do you make sure that the way you're addressing information security is appropriate for your organization. So those are the key management clauses, 27001 clauses 4 through 10. And the FasTrack approach really is a project approach. So it doesn't just deal with ISO 27001, it deals with what are we trying to achieve. It starts with a project mandate. What is the policy? What are we hoping to achieve by doing this? What's the scope of the management system? How are we going to see the project process go on? How are we going to set up the information security management system goals for itself? How are we going to manage the project itself? How are we going to how are we going to determine what tasks people have to do, manage people towards achieving those specific tasks. So that's not just reading ISO 27001, that's running implementation and maintenance thereafter as an ongoing project. So you then need to identify the key processes you're going to put in place, how are we going to develop and implement them, what policies and procedures do we need to draft and document, how are we going to roll those out so that all of the relevant controls are dealt with. Inside our management framework, how are we going to reflect that documentation? How do we make sure that our compliance framework is linked to how we do documentation generally? How do we tie that into our HR management strategies, our disciplinary strategies, our internal communication strategies, and so on? We're going to identify those controls, those information security controls that we have to put in place in order to comply with regulations, what we call the baseline security criteria. Those get put into place as a requirement. So GDPR, for instance, requires that only those people who need to access personal data may access it, so that'll go into your access control policy. You don't need to do a risk assessment to decide to do that. There's a baseline security, a regulatory requirement to do that. The CyberComply delivers exactly that. You then do a risk assessment. Your risk assessment saying, okay, given what we know we have to put in place to meet regulatory requirements, what are the additional risks that we've got, the additional exposures we've got? How are we going to determine what controls to put in place to deal with those? How are we going to bring exposure down to a level that's acceptable to the organization? And the answer is we're going to select controls or additional controls. We're going to determine the extent to which we apply them, and we'll generate a statement of applicability and a risk treatment plan that's set out in a formal way exactly what we do. And of course, CyberComply does those things out of the box. We then come to the bigger job, which is, there's a bunch of controls you've already got in place. Those are now documented thoroughly in your ISMS, and there are some additional controls that need to be put in place. And the risk treatment plan sets out who's going to do them. You've got a time frame by when they're going to be implemented, and you get on with doing them and checking that they are working in a way that they should do. And you're then into the business as usual phase of your implementation, which is doing the internal audit, measuring control effectiveness, monitoring the way in which staff awareness training has been rolled out, and moving into management review. Management review is at least once a year. You review a number of standardized inputs around effectiveness, control, continual improvement, changes in the management system. You make decisions about what you might need to do differently thereafter. It's a key requirement. And you're now ready for your certification audit. So step 9 is the external certification audit, which should go in a very straightforward way now, because apart from anything else, your external auditor can simply log on to CyberComply. They can see your internal audit plan. They can call for any of the documentation they need to see. All of that can be tracked and documented inside CyberComply. So the audit process itself gets to be a whole lot simpler. So the FasTrack approach is a project-built approach which deals with all of the key areas in terms of getting ready for audits, and because it's a platform, enables you to go on monitoring, measuring, and dealing with information security on an ongoing basis, dealing with your annual surveillance visits all the way through the lifetime of your ISMS. And that really enables you to transform compliance into a competitive advantage. ISO 27001 should deliver compliance with the mandatory requirements of ISO 27001. So that's clauses 4 through 10. Clauses 4 through 10 is what you have to do. The set of controls in Annex A are a referent list. You don't have to do any of them. You only have to put in place the controls which are appropriate for your baseline security criteria or for your risk assessment. And the referent control set, there'll be some controls that are not appropriate, and you'll identify that you've not put them in place. The statement of applicability simply sets out which of your Annex A controls you have selected and which ones are not, and why not. Because your scope statement will also include the legal and regulatory and perhaps contractual obligations that your ISO 27001 management system is designed to meet, your ISO 27001 certificate can become very easily a single external audited document which demonstrates your compliance with a key set of requirements. So that's a really beneficial, useful. Your ISO 27001 certificate is a public certificate. You could put it on your website. You can share it with customers. It's a third-party audit certificate. And the fact that you then comply with your own policies and procedures means that you have, as a management team, the assurance that your management system is keeping you out of trouble. So that's a number of really key benefits that you get out of your ISO 27001 management system. Remember, compliance means consistent and full compliance. Controls that you've selected applied all of the time, everywhere in scope, and they're working effectively. It's not just we've selected them and we hope they work. And it means continual improvement in the ISMS in terms of delivering on your information security objectives. And your information security objectives you would have determined right at the stage where you're determining what is it you want to get out of ISO 27001, your information security management system. I've talked a number of times about the ongoing maintenance, and that really is the key part of the management system. And if there's, for me, one reason why you would want to put your ISMS on a platform, it's to make the ongoing maintenance much more straightforward. If everything is in a standardized set of processes, in a standardized platform to which your internal auditors, your internal management, your external auditors all have access, all can be taught how to use a standardized set of processes with a comprehensive set of documents which you know are complete. You're in a position where you're not spending any time worrying about whether your management system is correct or not. You can start focusing from the off as to how well your management system is delivering on your objectives. You can identify areas for improvement, and you can focus on driving those areas of improvement through internal audits. As internal audits, penetration tests, vulnerability scans, staff awareness training results, all of those are released through the platform. You very quickly enable yourself to see how your controls are delivering on your information security objectives. And so by the time you come to do management review, which, as I said, is at least once a year, or when there are significant changes in the management system, you can very easily see how your ISMS has enabled you to achieve your objectives and to identify the areas in which you need to be looking for major enhancements or changes in strategy. Because it's all on a single platform, all managed in this kind of coherent, comprehensive manner, it means that the life of your external auditors is made a whole lot simpler. They know what they're logging into. They know that they don't need to test the correctness of the processes. They just need to focus on whether or not the processes are being applied or not. So it can keep your internal auditors' costs down, but also enable external auditors to focus more on how they can add value rather than spending time focusing on whether your documentation complies with the standard or not. They can focus on how do they add value? Because remember, external auditors are auditing lots of organizations, so they too are able to draw on a lot of knowledge and should be able to say to you, in another company, a bit like yours, we found they did X. That can be useful input. So platform access and integration can make audits simpler, but also really value-adding. And of course, it's accredited certification that you fundamentally want to be looking at. The information security management system will be certified because you can demonstrate that management has signed up to it, that the ISMS is delivering on proper identified requirements for customers and stakeholders. Continual improvement is working effectively. Internal audit is in place. Management review is doing the work it should be. And so the stage one, reviewing the documentation, that's now kind of straightforward. Stage one audits under CyberComply should be very quick and effective because the documentation by definition complies with ISO 27001. Stage two audits by the accredited certification body and continual annual visits or continuing surveillance visits, the checkups, are you still on track? All of that is made hugely simple by doing ISO 27001 on a platform like CyberComply. And of course, if you already know this, then great, but accredited certification is carried out by accredited certification bodies. They certificate your system. They may not give you advice on how to implement ISO 27001. They can only tell you whether or not you've done it in accordance with the standard. And accredited certification bodies are themselves accredited by a national accreditation body. So in the UK, it's UCAS. In Ireland, it's INAB. In Germany, it's DAX. And the accreditation body will assess all of the certification bodies who are operating in that area and will determine whether or not they have a scheme which enables them to audit compliance with particular standards, ISO 27001, ISO 9001, and so on. So when you're choosing a certification body, you can choose any certification body you like, as long as it is accredited to deliver certificates in your region, then that will be appropriate for you. But once you've got the certificate, it will be valid internationally because all of those accreditation bodies are themselves members of the International Accreditation Forum, which means there's a mutual a recognition program in place so that any UCAS accredited ISO 27001 certificate will be recognized in Germany, in France, in America, wherever it is, because UCAS is part of the IAF. In the UK, as I said, UCAS is recognized by the Department for Business Information and Skills. So I've talked a lot about ISO 27001. I'm going to talk briefly about the CyberComply solution, and then I'm going to hand over to any questions that you've got. CyberComply, as I said, is a cloud-based GRC platform. It's designed to enable organizations to manage compliance to whatever it is that you need to comply with. And unlike some platforms which will give you like one standard, CyberComply just says it's a compliance platform. It's a GRC compliance platform. You will get access to everything that's available on the platform for the same straightforward price. So if it's ISO 27001, if it's Cyber Essentials documentation, if it's UK GDPR, if it's HIPAA, the documentation is available to you. And that means that when you comply today with whatever you have to comply today with, you are future-proofed for what you might have to comply with tomorrow. When a client comes along and says, oh, by the way, I need you to comply with the SIS 18 controls, you can go, okay, how do I do that? The answer is they're on CyberComply. They're crosswalked to the existing standards that I'm using, so that makes my life massively simpler. But you can also draw on a whole range of relevant services, because the truth is that for most of our clients, while they're good at their work, they're not necessarily good at the cybersecurity privacy stuff. You might need a DPO, you might need a CISO, and the range of services that you can get from IT governance can all be delivered, can all tie into your CyberComply platform, are built around CyberComply. So if you need a virtual CISO, for instance, we deliver that sat on the CyberComply platform because that enables us to drive out the cyber risk assessment, to drive tasks, to track compliance, to track control effectiveness. All of the things you want a virtual CISO to do can be done effectively and robustly through the CyberComply platform. Penetration testing, the results can be fed into your CyberComply platform. So what CyberComply delivers is a complete solution, yes, for the additional services, those are additional prices, the standards and frameworks within the CyberComply, those are all included in the cost, but you can get something which enables you to deal with your defense in depth, the identify, protect, detect, respond, recover components of defense in depth across the entire range of relevant information security and privacy regulations. You can go beyond simply ISO 27001 because of the reality that all standards and frameworks are available at the same price. You are future-proofed. The CyberComply enables senior management to see where you are in terms of compliance. The integration of CyberComply with, for instance, your help desk software enables you to manage incidents in a way that is coherent, is consistent with the law, enables you to learn lessons from cyber incidents that you've triaged effectively. The integration of privacy and cybersecurity means your GDPR compliance gets to be effective right from the off. A whole bunch of stuff that comes right at the outset. So if you think about CyberComply as the how do I get ISO 27001 certification, CyberComply delivers that. It also delivers everything else that you might need in a way that enables you to go well beyond ISO 27001 very quickly and very cost effectively. DORA is a good example of how ISO 27001 enables that to happen. So DORA is a regulation that bites on EU financial sector organizations and on managed service providers supporting them. You have to be compliant by the 17th of January 2025. The compliance manager in CyberComply has automated documentation and guidance, implementation guidance, maps to ISO 27001 controls. You can easily identify the additional DORA requirements. You can identify and manage risks around that. You can identify staff awareness training that you need, work out how to deploy that, manage suppliers, manage very specific DORA business continuity, for instance, testing compliance requirements, all of that built into your CyberComply journey. So managing compliance gaps, data protection impact assessments, data flow mapping, your ROPA, your Article 30 GDPR compliance, all that's just out of the box. So you get ISO 27001 plus everything else out of the box, plus access to the relevant specialist help that you might need from genuine human beings. And if you're going down the FastTrack route, that's a kind of one-time price which has got that built in. So it's a solution that is really worthwhile looking at. Many of our customers would say exactly that. And I'll leave you, once this webinar is complete, to follow up through websites to look at why increasing numbers of our clients say they don't want to risk it, they're going to cyber comply it. It's a practical solution to get ISO 27001 ready. So you can find the standards on our websites. You can get ISO 27001 training on our websites, lead implementer, lead auditor training if you do want to do it yourself. You can, if you've got an existing ISO 27001 2013 qualification, you can upgrade to 2022. You do have to upgrade. All of those are available through our websites. So depending on whether you're doing this yourself, you need a little bit of help, or you need the full amount of help that comes with FastTrack, IT governance is your single source of solution to all of that. And that brings me almost exactly to the 45 minutes I thought it would, to the Q&A section. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you didn't already, in your GoToWebinar top ribbon, there is a box designed for you to input questions to, and you can input any questions that you've got into that. I'll just pause for a moment so any of you who have questions can put those in. There's a few questions there already, and then what I'll do is I'll read out the question so everybody knows what the question is, and then I'll answer the question. So I'll just give you a minute or so to start inputting questions. Click on the Q on the question box nearly top right hand corner, a couple of icons in from the right hand corner of your GoToWebinar screen, the top panel. Click on that question box, it'll open up and you'll see that you can type in questions. So is there a minimum set of controls that must be evaluated in order for a very small company to be considered for certification? For example, what if you only have 3 or 4 controls? And that's absolutely fine. The ISO 27001 does not mandate a minimum number of controls or a maximum number of controls. All it does is point to Annex A, which has got a list of just under 100 controls, and says whatever controls you select, you must map to Annex A, and your statement of applicability must have all of those controls listed in it, and you must identify which ones you've applied and which ones you haven't applied, and where you haven't applied them, why not. And the why not might be because we don't have a risk. The reality is that while you think you might only need 3 or 4 controls, most organizations quite quickly discover that they've got more than 3 or 4 controls. So if you think about, for instance, where people work is on even on a small organization with everybody working remotely, maybe using laptops. You're still going to have some physical controls. You're going to have some physical controls around who can come into the room in which people are working on financially sensitive information. You have some controls over how you protect laptops when people are out and about. All of those are controls which are covered in ISO 27001. If you're processing personal data, you'll have to have some controls around who can access that data and how you encrypt data when you share it. So the reality is that you will find you have more than 3 or 4 controls, but there is no mandated minimum number of controls. There is simply whatever the right number of controls is for your organization. And our FastTrack approach recognizes that. So our FastTrack approach for a micro organization may cost less than £10,000 to get you to the point where you're ready for certification, because it's much simpler, much quicker. But it's exactly the same FasTrack approach as the one which I went through on the screen in the webinar. So that's the answer to that particular question. Another micro SME with advanced data protection that's caught the interest of global tech companies. Very good. With very limited resources, less than 6 people, how can we fast track ISO 27001 cost effectively using your firm's talents? And the simple answer to that is come to us, ask for us to give you a price to do fast track under 10 people. We've always had a fast track offer for very small organizations. It'll cost less than £10,000. It will get you to the point where you are certification ready. It's likely to be somewhat less than £10,000, but we will get you there. And I would imagine it's going to be between 1 and 2 months, because the reality is that your certification requirements are not going to be that dramatic. A lot of it will be self-evident, and our fast track process will get you there very, very quickly. So do, after this webinar, get hold of one of our account specialists, and we can talk to you about exactly how we can put together a fast track that gets you certification ready in between 1 and 2 months, very cost effectively. Right. So do we have a pre-screening test that you submit to companies? I'm not sure what you mean by a pre-screening test. At this point, if you're talking about pre-screening to clients, if you can just give me more information on another question about what you mean by pre-screening test, and I will answer that question for you. Can you help an organization certified to ISO 27001 2013 that wants to upgrade to 27001 2022? Yes, we're doing that all the time. And there are really 2 approaches to how to go about doing it. One is essentially where we help you do it and you essentially do it, and the other is where we basically do it for you. The starting point in both cases is an audit done against ISO 27001 2022. So not against 2013. We audit your existing management system against ISO 27001 2022. By definition, that will identify a number of non-conformances. There will be some small number of non-conformances in the mandatory clauses 4 through 10, where there have been some changes, and there will be some non-conformances in terms of controls that ought to be in place but are not in place, taking the Annex A from ISO 27001 2022. You then have a risk treatment plan. You have a plan for implementing the changes that the audit has identified. And once you've done that, you're ready for audit ISO 27001 2022. And either you can do that yourself, so we do the audit, give you the audit findings, you get on with implementing them, or we do the audit, we tell you what the audit findings are, and then one of our consultants works with you to do that. A number of our clients who previously did ISO 27001 manually with documentation in SharePoint and scattered around have taken this opportunity to put all of their documentation into CyberComply, because it makes it so much easier for them not only to maintain CyberComply in the short term, but to deal with all future upgrades. You know, our existing ISO 27001 2013 clients got all of the upgrade documentation simply delivered to them as part of their ongoing CyberComply subscription. So either one of those options are possible. Do talk directly to one of our account managers, and we can tell you how we can help you upgrade to 27001 2022. Obviously, if you've got people who have 2013 lead implementer or lead auditor certificates, you can go through a training course, you can do an upgrade exam, you can get those certificates up to 2022 requirements, so that you meet those sets of requirements. So just make sure, a couple of questions around ISO 27001 pre-screening. So the way in which ISO 27001 certification works is that the external auditor, the certification auditor, a company like BSI or a DNV or Perry Johnson registrars, will carry out an audit and will audit you against ISO 27001 2022, and they will identify any areas in which you are not conformant to the standard. And those will be findings that you then have to deal with in order to have them maybe re-audit, but certainly check that what you've done gets you up to stand. They'll then issue you with a compliance certificate. What we in IT governance do is what comes before that. We help you prepare for the third-party audit. So we typically, depending on where an organization is, we might do a gap analysis, which is perhaps another way of describing an evaluation questionnaire. We could do a gap analysis depending on where the client is and where you are. We could do a gap analysis, which is a standardized process, which it's a bit like an audit, but it's subtly different. There's a gap analysis tool in CyberComply. It enables you to identify the areas in which you are not doing what ISO 27001 would require you to do, and therefore enables you to put together an implementation plan for how you get on with it. And organizations, frankly, some will start their ISO 27001 journey, and they've already got quite a lot of the elements in place. Others will start their ISO 27001 journey, and they've got almost no elements in place. In one level, doesn't matter at all. All that matters is that you're clear about what you need to do. That's the gap analysis process, and then you get on with doing it. If you're doing it all on CyberComply, actually that's a whole lot simpler, because the requirements are structured in CyberComply. You just simply, it's set out that how to do it is there's a guidance in CyberComply for people doing it themselves. If you're working with one of our consultants, we go through the 9-step process in a very structured way. And wherever you currently are, we help you do whatever you haven't got in place so that you are ready for the 2-stage external audit. The first stage of the external audit is looking at your documentation to say, does it comply with ISO 27001? If you've done ISO 27001 CyberComply, the answer to that is an immediate yes, because you're using documentation which is built to comply with ISO 27001. Stage 2 is, are you doing what your documentation says you will do? And again, the substantial portion of that work the certification body will do on CyberComply. And if you've done right, or we've helped you do right, everything that leads up to that, when the certification body does their audit, they will find that you're doing pretty well everything that you should be doing. I hope that answers your question about pre-evaluation. If not, please do ask me another question, but I hope that has helped set out what the process looks like. Great. And that's kind of bringing us, ladies and gentlemen, pretty well to the end of the time that we have. I'm just checking the questions. I think I've dealt with all of your questions. So 3 main websites, US, EU, UK. You can access our full set of ISO 27001 products and services through any one of our websites, through any one of our regional teams. We obviously do things appropriate for the region, each of those regions. So please do, if there's anything that I've talked about which is going to help you progress your information security, your ISO 27001 strategy, please come straight on to us right away. We'll respond as fast as we possibly can. And otherwise, ladies and gentlemen, I hope this has been a useful webinar. Please do come back and join us for other webinars. There's a whole series of webinars we run on an ongoing basis around cybersecurity, privacy, and the range of regulations that more and more organizations are finding they're having to deal with. So on that note, I wish you all a safe and secure rest of today and this week. Thank you for being with us. Bye-bye.